your help, Senator Sanders will be elected president. It truly is all of you in this room who will decide the next president of the United States, which is why I'm so thrilled to introduce here in my hometown, the U.S. Senator from Vermont, and the next president of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
Alex, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all very much for inviting me to be with you this evening. And let me thank Ray and Martha and Douglas and all of you for your service, not only to the people of New Hampshire, but to the people of our country. It is fashionable nowadays to make fun of people or put down people who get involved in politics, whether they serve on the school board. And when I was mayor of Burlington, my wife was on the school board, whether they served in the state legislature. And I guess I know that all of you who are in the legislature, who served in the legislature, are clearly motivated by the big bucks. So I should not have done it. But everybody in this room knows that when you get involved in politics, either serving in elected officials, as an elected official, or just working to help other people get elected, it takes a lot out of your life, and it takes a lot out of your family's life. And I think people don't appreciate the sacrifice that many folks make. And one of the concerns that I have had, and to some degree what this campaign is about, is trying to revitalize American democracy. It is trying to bring more people into the political process. So I thank you all very much for everything that all of you are doing. Let me just say a few words about the campaign, and then I want to get to the issues that we have been talking about around the country. The campaign is doing well. It was funny, I spoke to my wife a few minutes before I walked in here, and she said, somebody, we got all these questionnaires, people want to, like a million questions that everybody asks, and somebody asked us, tell us what so far has been the most interesting revelatory moment in New Hampshire. And I thought about it for a moment, and it occurred to me is literally the day or the second day after we announced, we went to the South Church here in Portsmouth, and we had about 750 people there. And we walked in there and said, whoa, something is happening. We were just here last Sunday night at the university, and we had about 3,000 young people out. And so I like Portsmouth, actually, very much. It's a great town. But what our campaign is doing is not just bringing out a lot of people in New Hampshire or Iowa or many other parts of the country. We have an enormous volunteer network. We have several 100,000 people who on any given day are handing out literature or knocking on doors or making phone calls. And also, we are the only non-billionaire candidate for president. I will not name who that other person is. Who does not have a super PAC. And when you don't have a super PAC, in today's day and age, you understand that you're going to be outspent, and that is the fact. We will be significantly outspent. But, on the other hand, what has happened in this campaign, which moves me greatly, and I'm very appreciative, we have more people making individual contributions than any other campaign. And I think we're somewhere over 500,000 people, individuals, who have made contributions. And the average contribution is, we used to be $31.21, but I have to announce with great sadness, it's actually gone down. It's now $29 and something. But, it is an interesting question, and I don't know the answer. I guess we will find out the answer. Whether in this day and age, when billionaires are pouring huge amounts of money into the political process, whether a candidate can in fact win an election with an average contribution of $29. So stay tuned and we'll see what happens. Let me also just talk, again, a little bit about politics. I have said repeatedly, all over this country, that the Republicans did not win the midterm elections last year. They didn't win it. We lost it, and we should understand that. We lost it because the voter turnout was beyond abysmal. Beyond abysmal. In my own state of Vermont, it was the lowest turnout since the 1940s. And all over this country, that's what we saw. We saw 63% of the American people not voting. Now, admittedly, that was not the presidential election, that was the midterm elections. But we were deciding the future of the United States Senate and the United States House. Not insignificant developments. 63% of the American people did not vote. 80% of young people did not vote. Now, as you all know, what happens in this country is when the voter turnout is small, Republicans win. That's a fact. When the voter turnout is large, Democrats win. To win the White House, to regain control of the Senate, hopefully to even win the House, to win governor's seats all over this country, the only way we do that is with a large and enthusiastic voter turnout. One of the things that I don't take credit for it per se, but what I will tell you is we go out around the country to see the energy and the enthusiasm of young people coming out, of working people coming out, people who are sick and tired of the status quo. They are tired of seeing the very rich getting richer and everybody else getting poorer, and they want some fundamental changes in the way we do economics and politics. And I think that message is resonating. I think that message can result in a very large turnout, which will not only help us to retain the White House, but to do well all over, up and down the slate. I'll say a word or two about a couple of issues that are dear to my heart and issues that I have been working on for many, many years. You here in New Hampshire see a whole lot of candidates troping through your state. And you hear from a lot of Republicans, and many of them are telling you and they're telling the American people that Social Security is going broke and that Social Security benefits have got to be cut, or that we have to raise the eligibility age for Social Security. So let me be the first to tell you, and I know this will not shock you, that what many of these Republicans are saying simply is not the truth. Now, I know that shocks you, because you assume that everything Republicans say is 100% accurate and honest. So what are the facts? And it's important that we know this. Social Security today has a $2.8 trillion in the trust fund. Social Security can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 19 years. That is the fact. Now, in the great scheme of things, is 19 years a long enough window? The answer is no. We have got to extend the life of Social Security. We have some ideas as to how to do that. But if anyone tells you that Social Security is going broke and it has to be cut, they are not telling you the truth. And the second point is, if anyone tells you that Social Security is causing the deficit or adding to the national debt, you also know that that is not true. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that the Republicans forgot to pay for, that is causing the deficit, and that is adding to the national debt. Social Security is not, because as all of you know, it is funded independently by the payroll tax. So the two main arguments that the Republicans make are not true. A, it's not going broke. B, it's not adding to the deficit. C, where do we go from here? Well, I will tell you that in my state, and I know in your state, there are a whole lot of people who today, who are receiving Social Security, who are trying to stay alive on incomes of $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year. And frankly, I don't know how they do it. And actually, in many cases, they really don't. Because what they will end up doing is cutting their their prescription drug doses in half. They will not keep their homes warm enough in the wintertime. They will not buy the food that they need. When you have millions of Americans, our parents and our grandparents, trying to get by on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year, you do not do what Republicans want, and that is to cut Social Security. Rather, in my view, what you do is to expand Social Security benefits. And the way you do it is not hard to understand. All of you know there is a cap right now on taxable income going into the Social Security Trust Fund. It's $118,500. So you got a guy making $5 million, somebody making $118,000. They're both contributing the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you lift that cap, and you don't start at 118, you start at $250,000 a year. What you will be able to do is extend the life of Social Security to 2061, and you will be able to expand benefits for those who are elderly on Social Security and those who are dealing with disabilities. And that is exactly, in my view, what we should do. There's another issue that has been getting some attention lately that I wanted to say a word about. Way back in, I think, the late 1990s, I was the first member of the U.S. Congress, I was then in the House, to take Americans, people from northern Vermont, over the Canadian border to buy less expensive prescription drugs. First one. And I will never forget that day, because we had arranged the trip, but we had a busload of mostly women from Franklin County area, that's in northern Vermont. And many of them were struggling with breast cancer. These are working class women struggling with breast cancer, had a lot on their minds. And we went over the Canadian border to Montreal, and they were able to buy the medicine that they needed, that they were taking in Vermont, for 1/10 the price that they were paying in the United States. 10%. And I will never forget tears coming out of the eyes of some of those women. Now, why is it that in the United States of America, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Well, it has everything to do with the extraordinary power of the pharmaceutical industry, an industry that spends hundreds of millions of dollars every single year on lobbying and campaign donations. And the result of that is not only that we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, the result is, incredibly enough, 1 out of 5 Americans who go to the doctor and get a prescription cannot afford to fill that prescription. Now, what sense is that? And then on top of that, we see the top 3 companies, prescription drug companies in this country, drug companies, made $45 billion in profit last year. So what you have is a situation where millions of people cannot afford to buy their drugs. Pharmaceutical industry spends huge amounts of money lobbying to preserve their position, which is unique in the world. We are the only country in the world, in the industrialized world, where you can walk into your drugstore tomorrow and find out that the price of the medicine you need has doubled or tripled. And no one can do anything about it. They can do anything they want. They can raise prices to any level they want. Well, some of us have fought back, and you've read recently some of the outrageous increases in prescription drugs. We've been able, I think, to maybe turn that around a little bit. But clearly there are a number of things that we have got to do. Number one, it is totally absurd that Medicare today is not negotiating prices with the drug companies. The Veterans Administration does it, and so should Medicare. And that will substantially lower the cost of drugs in this country. And the second issue, I got to tell you, as I will in a moment, I am not a great fan of unfettered free trade. I think it has hurt many American workers over the years. But here's what is interesting. Give me a few hours, I'll get to that issue in a moment. But here is what is interesting, and I want all of you to appreciate it. The proponents of unfettered free trade talk all about the wonderful benefits that cheap goods coming into this country from China and everybody else, how great it is. And yet, for some strange reason, we can bring lettuce and tomatoes in from a small farm in Mexico, not a problem, but we cannot bring major name brand prescription drugs in from Canada. Just can't do it. We just can't figure out how we can do it, and whether or not those drugs from this, strange country, Canada, will be tampered with. And this is the line that members of Congress for years have believed. So if we did nothing else but allowed distributors and pharmacists to purchase the same medicine that they are selling to you today at the prices being paid in Canada, Germany, UK, or any place else around the world, we will also substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs. So those are two issues that we have got to stay vigilant on. Sadly, in the last couple of years, we've seen the number of people, the percentage rate of seniors living in poverty going up. A lot of seniors are struggling, and we have got to do everything that we can to stand up to those Republicans who want to give huge tax breaks to billionaires at the same time they want to cut Social Security. And we've got to stand up to the drug companies and tell them, sorry, you cannot continue to rip off the American people. Now, as I have gone around the country in this campaign, obviously we bring out large crowds and people come up to me. I think the nicest compliment that I have received was from a young man somewhere out in the West Coast. And he said, Senator, you treat us like we are intelligent people, which is unusual. And what that means, is that our campaign is pretty simple and straightforward. What we do is talk about the most important issues facing the people of our country, and then we try to come up with ideas in terms of how to resolve those problems. And one of the problems, very serious problems that we have, is that we have a media in this country which to a significant degree looks at politics as if it were a baseball game or a soap opera. So you will find article after article about the latest polls or how much money somebody raises, most of which most Americans could care less about, but very little serious discussion about the important issues that impact the lives of tens of millions of Americans. So we have kind of gone against the grain here, and whether we get media to discuss these issues or not, that's what we have been talking about. What are the most important issues facing the American people? Let me just, in the 5 hours that I have, just touch on a few. Just kidding, don't worry. We'll get on. One issue that cannot be swept under the rug, and that is the issue of income and wealth inequality. That's just a simple, huge issue. And what that means is that the United States of America has more income and wealth inequality than any major country on earth, and it is worse today than at any time since 1928. That's just the fact. To my mind, it is profoundly wrong when the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That's the fact. Are we comfortable living in a nation where the top 1/10 of 1% own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%? In your state and in Vermont and all over this country, you all know people who are not working one job, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, trying to cobble together enough income and maybe health care benefits to provide for their families. It just so happens that in the United States, not everybody knows this, but in the United States, our people work the longest hours of any people in any major country on earth. Japanese are very hardworking people. We work longer hours than the Japanese do. And yet, today, despite people working 2 or 3 jobs, 58% of all new income created today goes to the top 1%. Today in America, you got one family, the Walton family of Walmart, owning more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. In the last 2 years, the 14 wealthiest people in America, Bill Gates, Buffett, Koch brothers, those guys, saw their wealth increase by $156 billion. That's an increase in their wealth. 14 people, which is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million Americans. That's a fact. In other words, what you have is a rigged economy, and the nature of the structure of the economy is that the rich become much, much richer, while almost everybody else becomes poorer. And we've got to lay that issue on the table, and what we have got to fight for is an economy that works for working families and not just the top 1%. When we talk about the economy, here's another point that has to be made. I think sometimes some Democrats make mistakes. And that is, everybody in this room knows what sadly too many Americans have forgotten. And that is, in the last 7 years, we have come a long way in improving the economy. Now, I know in America we suffer from a very serious disease called amnesia. And if you listen to the Republican debate, which I know was very difficult for some of us to do, I just felt the energy flowing out of my body after 2.5 hours. And you all know that in their view, every problem in the Western world, and the rest of the world as well, is attributed to Barack Obama, right? The causation of every problem. They seem to have forgotten what the economic situation was like the day that George W. Bush left office. When we were losing, this is an unbelievable number, 800,000 jobs a month. And some of my Republican colleagues are worried, you know, we're only creating 175,000 jobs a month. Frankly, that is not enough. But it's a hell of a lot better than losing 800,000 jobs a month. Some of my Republican colleagues seem to forget that when Bush left office, not only the American financial system, the world's financial system was literally on the verge of collapse. That economists were worried that you're going to put your credit card in an ATM machine and nothing was going to come out. Colleagues who were worried so much about the deficit, which is why we want to cut nutrition programs and Head Start. They just stay up nights worried about the deficit, seem to have forgotten when Bush left office, we had the biggest deficit in the history of this country, $1.4 trillion. Now, I say that because any objective person who is not totally obsessed with the hatred of Barack Obama will come to the conclusion that, of course, we are better off today than we were 7 years ago. That's not the debate. But here is a point that I think sometimes Democrats do not fully appreciate. Yes, we are better off than we were 7 years ago. But do you know what? For the last 40 years, not 7 years, for the last 40 years, the great middle class of this country, once the envy of the entire world, has been disappearing. And that's a fact, and we cannot run away from it. So we could say, hey, we're better off today than we were 7 years ago. True enough. But the median male worker, that worker right in the middle of the economy, is earning today in adjusted inflation adjusted for wages, $700 less than he made 42 years ago. The woman right in the middle of the American economy is making about $1,300 less today than she made in 2007. Median family income is some $4,000 less today than it was in 1999. So it's not good enough for us to say we're better than we were off today than we were 7 years ago. We have got to understand and come up with answers to why for 40 years the middle class of this country has been disappearing. Now, when we talk about why people in this country are working incredibly long hours, we have to recognize that for millions and millions of our people, wages in this country are just too low. $7.25 minimum wage is a starvation wage, and that's just simply the truth of it. And that is why I am really happy to see all over this country, as a result of some grassroots activism. You saw it in Seattle, you saw it in Los Angeles, you're seeing it in New York State, where people are working for $7.50, $8 an hour, and I met with many of them. And they're saying, sorry, we can't survive on that. We need to raise the minimum wage, and I agree with them. And that is why I am fighting to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next 7 years. When we talk about the economy, let me just mention something to you that I think many of you already know. Every month, the federal government comes out with some statistics on unemployment. The statistic that you usually see on the front page of the paper deals with official unemployment, which nationally now is about 5.1%. But there is another statistic that the government comes out with, which you often don't see, which includes those people who have given up looking for work and those people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. Adding that together, real unemployment in this country is over 10%. So anyone who thinks that, hey, we've solved the unemployment problem, you are wrong. We have not. And let me tell you something else which is almost never, ever discussed. Pope Francis talks about it from an international perspective, but it is certainly true in the United States, and that is youth unemployment. We never talk about it. But here's the story. 6 weeks ago or so, I asked a group of economists to do a study for me. What is real unemployment for young people between the ages of 17 and 20 who graduated high school, didn't drop out, graduated high school? Here was the results. If the kids were white, 33% real unemployment. Hispanic, 36%. African American, 51%. Now, most of you know that the United States of America has more people in jail than any other country on earth. Communist China, over 3 times our size. They don't tolerate dissent all that much over there. We have more people in jail than China does. And if anyone here thinks there is not a direct correlation between outrageously high youth unemployment, kids hanging out on street corners in Manchester and Burlington and all over this country, and the fact that we have so many people in jail, you would be sorely mistaken. Of course there is a correlation. And that is why I firmly believe that it makes a lot more sense to invest in education and jobs rather than jails and incarceration. I'm going to pay an increasing amount of attention to, of a broken criminal justice system, is something that we cannot turn our backs upon. Too many people's lives are being destroyed. They go to jail, they come out, they never get their lives together, their families suffer, the economy suffers. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, one of the things that I've been trying to do in this campaign is to educate the American people about how the United States compares in certain respects to other countries around the world. Obviously, some things we do that are great. We lead the world. But there are other areas where we do not do so great. Let me give you an example. When my Republican colleagues campaign for president, they often talk about family values. Family values. You all know what they mean by family values. What they mean is that women in this country should not have the right to control their own bodies. They mean, as we speak, literally right now, just left Washington this afternoon, great debate about defunding Planned Parenthood, etc., something they've been trying to do for God knows how long. Right? That is their understanding of family values, that women should not be able to control their own bodies. And they also believe, when they talk about family values, that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to get married. I strongly disagree with Republican family values. As someone who has 4 kids, and my son Levy is right here, and 7 beautiful grandchildren, 3 of them who live in Claremont, and having been married now for 27 years, my wife and I, we believe in family values. But our values are a little bit different than Republican family values. And when we talk about family values, we talk about ending the international embarrassment of the United States of America being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. Furthermore, we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid sick time and paid vacation time. And I, if elected president, will do everything that I can to end that embarrassment, including fighting for 3 months of paid family and medical leave for every family in this country. When we talk about what is going on in America, there is one issue which impacts every other issue. And that is, as all of you know, 5 years ago, by a 5-4 vote on the Supreme Court, that court voted for Citizens United, which allows the wealthiest people in this country to spend unlimited sums of money in campaigns. That's right. You're right. You said it more cogently than I am. And what that's about, what the Supreme Court essentially said to the big money interest, you already own much of the economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to purchase the United States government. And that is exactly what they are attempting to do right now. That's what all these super PACs are about. As many of you know, the Koch brothers themselves, the second wealthiest family in America, who I understand have some influence on politics right here in New Hampshire. All right. This one family is going to spend some $900 million in this election cycle alone. $900 million, which, as I understand it, is more than either the Democratic or Republican parties are going to spend. Now you tell me what kind of system that you are living under when one family can spend more money than either of the two major political parties. That does not sound like democracy to me. Rather, it sounds like oligarchy, and it's something that we must not allow to continue. Let me repeat a promise that I've made throughout this country, that no nominee of mine to the U.S. Supreme Court will get that position unless he or she is loud and clear in stating that one of the first orders of business that they will undertake will be to overturn Citizens United. Let me also tell you that we've got to go further than that. I believe in democracy. I am a fervent believer in grassroots democracy. I love it. I love the idea that in a democracy, people can come up and they can argue with each other and talk about the problems they perceive and then vote on these issues. I think that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I want to see the United States of America have one of the highest voter turnouts in the world, not one of the lowest. I want to see young people who are interested in public service, no matter what their views may be, conservative, progressive, whatever. I want to see them being able to run for office without having to spend half their life hustling money from wealthy people. And that is why I believe fervently in public funding of elections. Another issue that's out there that is getting a lot of, I think, a response, and that is the fact that we are living in a very, very competitive global economy. Everybody knows that. We will not be successful now and in the future unless we have the best educated workforce in the world. It is beyond my comprehension, it really is, that today we have hundreds of thousands of bright young people who have the ability, have the qualifications, have the desire to get a higher education, to go to college, but they can't because their families lack the funds. In my view, what we have got to do is to make every public college and university in this country tuition free. Some people say, well, that's a great idea, kids can go to college, they won't go into debt, well, that's true. But I'll tell you why that is a revolutionary idea. It is revolutionary because there are kids in this city, in the 4th grade and in the 6th grade, who maybe come from families like mine, whose parents never went to college. They don't know anybody who ever went to college. The idea of going to college for them is as likely as going to the moon. It's just not in the cards. But if we can create a situation in this country where any kid who does his or her homework, studies hard, does well in school, knows that they will be able to get a college education, that will revolutionize education in general, and that is what I want to see happen. The other higher education issue that we have got to deal with is the fact that we have millions of people in this country who are shouldering very, very heavy student debt, which is impacting their everyday existence. There are young people who can't get married, can't have kids, can't buy a car, can't buy a home because they're paying 20-25% of their income in student debt. That is pretty crazy stuff. So what we have proposed as part of the same piece of legislation is to allow people with student debt to refinance their debt in the same way that you can refinance your home mortgage. And that is go out and get the lowest interest rates that you can. It makes no sense to me that people are paying 6, 8, 10% interest rates on their student debt when they can refinance their homes at 2, 3, 4%. And the second thing we're going to do is get the government out of the business of profiteering off of working class student debt. Now, people say, well, that's an expensive proposition. You really are trying to do a whole lot, and it's true. This idea is a very expensive proposition. It's about $70 billion a year. How are we going to pay for it? I will tell you how we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it based on a tax on Wall Street speculation. When, as a result of the greed and the recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street crashed, and they came begging the middle class and working class of this country to bail them out. Well, now it is their time to help the middle class of this country. Let me just close on an issue that Pope Francis has done, I think, an extraordinarily important, played a very important role in recent year. And that is, when we look at our responsibilities as adults, as parents, and as citizens of this planet, I think we understand that there is nothing more important that we can do than leaving this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for our children and our grandchildren. I am a member of both the U.S. Senate Energy Committee and the Environmental Committee. And in that capacity, I've heard from scientists not only all over the United States, but all over the world. And as I think most of you know, the debate is over. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems today in this country and around the world. And those problems will only get worse in years to come if we do not take bold action now. Responsibility to lead the world, to work with China, to work with Russia, to work with India, to work with countries all over this world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuels to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And the very good news is we know how to do this stuff. You know, I brought money in to Vermont. We have seen homes weatherized where we've reduced fuel bills and carbon emissions by 50%. It's going on all over the country. The cost of solar is going way, way down. In Iowa, in a few years, 40% of their electricity will come from wind. We know what we have to do. But what we also have to do is tell our Republican friends to break the ties with ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers, who are demanding that they ignore the scientific evidence. We got to demand that our Republican colleagues start paying attention to science and start worrying about the future for their kids and their grandchildren rather than next month's campaign contributions. I am generally thought of as perhaps the most progressive member of the United States Senate. So in that capacity, I obviously have huge disagreements with Republicans on every issue. But on this issue, it becomes not a disagreement, but an embarrassment. And the embarrassment is for a party that controls the U.S. House, controls the U.S. Senate, to actually ignore what the scientists are telling us. You cannot run a government or a society when you reject scientists, and that has got to change. What I have been saying throughout this campaign, and I repeat to you tonight, is what I beg of you is to think big, not small. don't get caught up in the debate where the conservatives want to cut education by 6% and the liberals only want to cut it by 2%. Don't get caught up into that mindset. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Now, most people don't know that because almost all of the wealth and income today is going to the top 1%. If we were a poor country, we could say, well, isn't it too bad that all of the kids can't get good education? We're just poor. Isn't it too bad that everybody can't have health care? We're just a poor country. We are not a poor country. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And there is nothing that if we stand together, we cannot accomplish. Now, I want people in this room to tell me why the United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people. Please don't tell me we can't do that. Please explain to me why in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, and millions of moms and dads who go to work every day are scared to death about the quality of child care they're forced to put their kids in. Tell me why we cannot have the best child care system in the world. Tell me why, if Germany and Scandinavia can provide free college education to their kids, tell me why we can't do that in the United States of America. Tell me why, when you have major corporations making huge profits, but who are stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands and in Bermuda and other tax havens, tell me why it is acceptable that major profitable corporations in a given year do not pay a nickel in federal taxes. And as Warren Buffett often reminds us, tell me why it is acceptable that hedge fund managers pay an effective tax rate lower than nurses or doctors or any of you. Why is that right? So what we have got to do is not think small, but we have got to think big. Think of what we can be as a nation. Now, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish, but we will not be able to accomplish those goals and many more of transforming our energy system, of doing all of the things that we need to do, unless there is a strong grassroots political movement in this country, what I call a political revolution. And I'm the only candidate for president who will tell you what is a simple truth. And that is no president, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else, can alone do the things that have to be done for the middle class of this country. And the reason is that the big money interests, corporate America, Wall Street, the drug companies, the corporate media, are just too powerful. And that's the simple truth. The only way that we transform this country is when millions and millions of people come together in an unprecedented type of political movement, look Washington in the eye and say, you know what? We are going to have a government which represents all of our people and not just the billionaire class. Tonight, campaign is about, it's not just electing Bernie Sanders to be president. That would be a good thing. I'd like that. But it is much more than that. It is creating a grassroots movement from coast to coast, which transforms the way we do politics in America. And let me conclude by inviting all of you to join that political revolution. Thank you very much.
Speech. As a token of our appreciation, we have a gift for you. It's a political satire novel by Gary Patton, who's a local Democratic activist, called Selling Mount Washington. I know you're pretty busy on the campaign trail, but it's a good book.